At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's GeneralG. Let's begin. The alarm's escalating discordant tones hammered Eric Hayes from his sleep. A sound designed for explosive decompression. A brutal summons to consciousness. Eric slapped at the control panel, his palm striking the uninsulated hull plate on his third try. The noise cut out. Pinned by the station's spin gravity, he lay in his bunk. Grit scraped behind his eyelids. A thrumming pressure pulsed behind them, a constant companion for the last 6 months. Sleep offered only shallow, fractured submersions into a muddy unconsciousness that left him more depleted than before. A low groan of stressed metal echoed through the room. Across the spare, gray space, Orzo stood, a Colossian, his frame woven from overlapping plates of muscle thick as mooring cables, braced his two massive four-fingered hands against the opposite bulkhead. His immense musculature strained, and the deck plates beneath his feet creaked in protest as he attempted to buckle the room itself. "Morning," Orzo rumbled, a sub-bass vibration Eric felt in his teeth. "Is it?" Eric mumbled, swinging his legs over his bunk's side. The movement took colossal effort. Every joint ached. He was 22, yet his body creaked like old machinery. As the first candidate in the Trine Mandate War College's Human Exchange Program, he was less a pioneer and more a specimen. The mess hall smelled of hot metal from the food synthesizers. Cadets hunched over bowls of reconstituted protein slurry, a standard-issue Axiomite field ration, a gelatinous gray mass with the texture of curdled paste. Its flavor dominated by the mineral supplements vital for Axiomite bone density. Eric forced down a mouthful, its texture making his throat tighten. The conversational murmur sharpened. Cadets kept glancing at a massive screen dominating one wall, where a shimmering competitive ladder of names and efficiency ratings displayed the weekly leaderboards. Axiomite names occupied the top 10 slots. As the Trine Mandate's architects and the Academy's designers, their bodies suited the curriculum better. At the center of a listening crowd, a hulking Axiomite upperclassman held court. Keyes was the Academy's model cadet, broad-shouldered, his limbs moving with an unsettling fluidity from an extra joint. He was Dean Sindel Marr's star pupil. "The Marr Series 4 synaptic strainer," Keyes said, gesturing with a spoon, "is about breath control. You fail if you let the feedback spike. I broke the threshold 4 times, but recovered before the system flagged me. New personal best." The cadets around him nodded, some murmuring approval. Eric spooned another mouthful of slurry, the flavor a metallic blank. A few tables away, another Axiomite watched the display. Saris, from a rival house to Mars. Where Keyes was direct and forceful, she was still and watchful. She took in the scene around Keyes, her pale features a placid mask, while she logged the social dynamics for future use. A chime sounded. A stern-faced Chiron instructor appeared on the screen. "Cadets, consult the posted Forge trial schedule. Report to the preparation chambers 30 minutes prior to your assigned session. Compliance is mandatory." The screen shifted, displaying a long list of names and times. Cadets craned their necks, murmuring as they found their assignments. Eric knew his place was at the bottom. He scrolled down the list on his personal data screen anyway. His name appeared. Cadet Hayes, E. 1300 hours, Forge Chamber 1, Marr Series, 12 Stress Induction Unit. An 8-hour session. A few nearby students saw him looking. He caught a handful of grimaces. More just smirked or looked away. The Series 12, nicknamed the Press, was notorious. Most students broke in under 3 hours. Eric took another bite of the gray sludge and pushed his bowl away. That was a long time. But in a silent, sealed pod, at least he'd be alone. The forge was a tiered chamber of empty observation seats rising into the gloom, all focused on the center. On a raised plinth sat the press. The sleek, coffin-shaped pod was a seamless matte black composite, marked only by a small Mar Industries logo near its seam. Two medical technicians moved in disciplined silence by the pod. Dean Sindel Mar sat in a high-backed chair in the first tier of seats, watching Eric's approach like a biologist studying a new fungus. Mar was a study in pale, willowy geometry. His axomite limbs folded into the chair with unnerving ease. A sharp crease defined his trousers. He regarded Eric's approach. "Cadet Hayes," Mar said, his level baritone filling the chamber. "Our human specimen. Eager to demonstrate your species' endurance limits, I trust?" "Just eager to get it over with, sir," Eric replied, his voice flat. Mar's thin lips formed a slight smile. "Of course, the press can be daunting. But remember, Cadet, pain is a tool, the crucible we use to forge true strength." He gestured with one long-fingered hand toward the pod. "Proceed." The technicians moved efficiently, one securing his wrists while the other attached soft pads to his temples and the base of his skull. One leaned in. "The simulation will begin on your command. The session is programmed for 8 hours, but you may terminate it at any time by speaking the safe word Red Sigma." Eric gave a short nod. The pod's heavy lid descended, its pneumatic hiss ending in a sudden sealed quiet. Absolute darkness enveloped him, the silence total. He took a slow breath, then another, bracing for the stories he'd heard. Simulated immolation, nerve cluster flagellation, his own bones grinding to powder. The program initiated. A low, pervasive tone began. The deep, steady thrum vibrated directly in his skull. A gentle pressure, like submerging in warm, heavy water, enveloped him. The pod's internal temperature was perfectly neutral. Eric waited. The tone continued, a steady, predictable hum. The high-frequency neuroacoustic field, calibrated for sensory overload in the axomite nervous system, became for him a profound silence, his own neurology, operating on a different bandwidth, registered the signals as a null field, a total sensory calm. For a mind frayed by months of fractured sleep, the quiet was arresting. The constant, low-grade pressure behind his eyes receded, smoothed away by the vibration. The quiet became an anchor. He let it fill him. He tried everything for his insomnia: meditation apps, noise generators, breathing exercises. This was different. The deep tension in his shoulders and jaw, a tightness carried so long it had fused with him, released. His shallow breathing evened out and deepened. A leaden heaviness came over him. His mind, starved for genuine recuperation, plummeted. His awareness dissolved into the first true sleep he'd known in months. The pod's opening hiss was a gentle intrusion. Cool white light spilled in. Eric blinked, disoriented, and took a moment to remember where he was. The technicians looked down at him, their disciplined composure gone. A young Jiren stared, his mouth slightly open. "Session complete," the other technician said, her voice strained. She helped him unbuckle the restraints. Eric sat up, swinging his legs over the side. The world's edges sharpened. Things were clearer. The persistent pressure behind his eyes had vanished. A lifetime of radio static in his head had switched off. He was rested. He looked over at the observation deck. Dean Mar stood. Mar gripped his chair's arm, his knuckles white. His composure shattered, his face a knot of disbelief, his lips a thin, bloodless line. Eric glanced at the large diagnostic screen beside the pod. Instead of jagged red lines of a stressed nervous system, a single blue wave undulated placidly across the display, Below it, a line of text glowed. Source, NA. Fault, cascading recuperative feedback. In his severe opulent office, Dean Sindel Marr stabbed a finger at his console. Data from Cadet Hayes' sessions scrolled across the holographic display. Heart rate stabilized. Cortisol levels plummeted. Brainwave activity synced with deep cycle REM. This was an abomination. The Series 12 Stress Induction Unit, the crown jewel of Marr Industries' pedagogical arsenal, had served as a high-tech sleeping bag. "The machine malfunctioned," Marr said to the nervous Axiomite aide hovering by the door. "A feedback loop must have shorted the neuroacoustic interface. A statistical impossibility." The aide hesitated. "Sir, a public viewing carries significant reputational risk. If another anomaly occurs—" "The machine will perform to specification," Marr cut in. "We'll validate its integrity as per Academy bylaws for a Level 1 fault, and we'll have the entire Corps as witnesses when the human specimen performs as designed. The event will be a lesson in both technological reliability and biological fragility." He looked at his aide, his pale eyes steady. "Order the technicians to run a full diagnostic and reset all parameters. I want a report on my desk by 0600. And schedule the human for another session tomorrow. A diagnostic test. 1600 hours. I'll personally oversee the calibration this time, manually." The aide nodded, almost bowing, and left the room. Marr turned back to the screen, watching the recording of Eric Hayes stepping from the pod, alert, clear-eyed, and looking more refreshed than any cadet Marr had ever seen. Far from the dean's sterile office, in a disused corner of the Academy archives, Cadet Iona Kell leaned closer to her own display. Only the soft hum of ventilation and her quiet breathing filled the space. She focused entirely on the data streams flowing across her screen. Eric's trial results. One pair of her slender tendrils studied a data screen while the other two danced across its surface, inputting commands. The Academy had ostracized her for her theories, for questioning the accepted dogma of pain index pedagogy. Her mentor, the Academy's original systems architect, lost his post for publishing research suggesting the Marr method had limited universal effectiveness. Before he left, he'd given her his legacy, privileged access keys to the system's analytical back doors. She pulled up a file. Pre-annexation Terran studies, neuroacoustic sensitivity ranges. A suppressed paper. She overlaid the human data with the schematic for the press's core generator. The machine's operating frequency, a needle peak of agitation for axiomites, fell squarely within a documented human null receptivity zone. They had dismissed neurology like his as too unsophisticated for proper stimulation. Iona tilted her smooth ovoid head. The recessed sensory membrane of her face pulsed faintly as she processed the archive's ambient vibrations. The design flaw was an outcome of species arrogance. She found Eric in the mess hall, sitting alone, eating a protein bar as if rediscovering flavor. She approached his table with direct, economical steps. She stopped a few feet away, tilting her head again as her senses analyzed the micro-vibrations of his posture, his breathing rhythm. "Your postural stability has improved since your last recorded baseline," she stated, her voice a clipped staccato rhythm. "The anomaly is persistent." Eric looked up, blinking. He'd seen her around, the Chiron who always sat alone. Iona stepped forward and placed a flexible display on the table between them. The display glowed to life, showing a chart of axiomite neuroacoustic sensitivity next to a human one. A glaring red bar marked the press's operating frequency, a peak of agitation for axiomites, and a flat, silent trough for humans. Marr founded his technology on a flawed assumption of neurological uniformity. Your biology is a strength, an unexploited tactical advantage. She looked at him, her sensory membrane a flat, neutral gray. I have the data. I have the theory. I require a willing test subject to achieve proof of concept. Dean Marr assembled nearly the entire Cadet Corps in the forge for Cadet Hayes's diagnostic session. He stood on a raised platform, his posture radiating authority. We experienced a minor sensor malfunction during yesterday's trial, he announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Today, we'll conduct a public diagnostic to demonstrate the press's operational integrity and gather further baseline data on our human candidate. In the front row, Keyes smirked, flanked by his usual cronies. Nearby, Saris tilted her head slightly, watching Marr as if assessing a game piece's value. As Eric walked toward the pod, Iona fell into step beside him, holding out a small audio device. His aide privately questioned the wisdom of a public viewing, she said in a low, rapid voice. Marr invoked Academy bylaws regarding technological validation. He intends to make an example of you. Eric took the device, a simple earpiece. The Marr patent confirms the core neuroacoustic field is foundational to the machine. Changing its base frequency would invalidate the patents on every piece of Marr tech in this building. He'll attempt to layer disruptive signals over it. White noise, strobing lights, simulated electroshocks. But the null field will remain. The silence at the storm's heart. She met his gaze. Anchor to it. Treat everything else as background noise. Eric nodded, sliding the earpiece into his ear. He gave her a small, tired grin. I'll be fine. I'm an expert at tuning things out. He settled into the pod, the technician strapping him in with a little more force than necessary. The lid hissed shut, plunging him into darkness. He took a deep breath. The tone started, the same deep, pervasive sound. He focused on it, just as Iona had said. A moment later, the attack began. A high-pitched screech tore through the pod, a sound like stressed, shearing metal. Blinding white light strobed against his eyelids. Sharp jolts, like magnified static electricity, ran across his skin. The assault was disorienting and chaotic. Marr used every tool at his disposal. But underneath it all, the profound quiet remained, a zone of utter stillness in the storm. Eric let the screeching fade. He let the strobing lights become a distant pattern. He accepted the jolts as just another sensation. He sank his entire consciousness into the quiet, letting it pull him down, away from the noise and pain. His exhaustion did the rest, craving the peace the quiet offered and dragging his mind toward it with irresistible gravity. He drifted off. When the pod hissed open, he had lost all track of time. 4 hours, a technician announced, his voice cracking on the last syllable. Eric sat up, a profound sense of rest and incredible clarity filling him. He looked past the stunned technicians to the watching crowd of cadets. Silence held them. A few just stared, mouths agape. Others exchanged confused glances. One lower-classman, a Carthian who'd washed out of the last trial, met his eyes and gave a slow, deliberate nod. Then he looked up at Dean Marr. Marr's knuckles were white where he gripped the railing. His polite facade had vanished, leaving a pinched, bloodless expression. Eric Hayes met his gaze and gave him a small, tired smile. The fundamental difference is one of philosophy, Iona explained. They gathered in her workspace in the archives, surrounded by stacks of decommissioned data drives. A single holographic display cast a blue glow on their faces, illuminating the complex biological charts she had compiled. Axiomite doctrine defines resilience as active resistance, the ability to consciously withstand and override pain signals through force of will. Your biology, however, defines resilience as passive recovery, The ability to subconsciously filter distracting stimuli and enter a recuperative state to mitigate systemic stress. Eric leaned back in a rickety chair, nursing a mug of something hot Iona had produced. The liquid tasted faintly of spiced soil. So they're trying to win a fight by blocking punches, and I'm winning by taking a nap. A crude but fundamentally accurate analogy, Iona confirmed, her tendrils flicking across the console. Mars' entire system rewards the former and punishes the latter. He sees recovery as a weakness he seeks to purge. We'll prove it's a weapon we can hone. And so they built a new method. In the Academy's forgotten corners, Iona broke down human biology into a series of exploitable systems. They codified controlled breathing techniques, borrowing from ancient Terran meditative disciplines, to manually regulate heart rate and lower cortisol levels under duress. They developed strategies for strategic micronaps, letting Eric enter a light, restorative sleep state for mere minutes, a biological reset button to maintain cognitive function when exhaustion set in. Eric spent hours in dusty simulators Iona had jury-rigged, calming his mind while the machines threw chaotic sensory data at him. He learned the telltale signs of adrenaline fatigue, of cognitive decline, and how to counter them with a moment of calculated stillness. While Eric trained, Iona combed through the performance logs of every cadet in the Academy using her mentor's back doors. She focused on the failures. She identified cadets from other species whose biologies made them incompatible with Mars' rigid doctrine. Her first recruit was Orso, Eric's Colossian roommate. Iona approached him in the weight room, where he was leg-pressing a weight that would have turned Eric into thin paste. She held out a flexible display. Your performance in endurance trials drops sharply after the 20-minute mark. Mars' doctrine classifies this as a failure of stamina. My analysis indicates it's a predictable consequence of your musculature's oxygen consumption rate. Your body excels at short, explosive bursts of overwhelming force that require a recovery period, making it ideal for assault tactics over sustained low-level exertion. Orso stared at the data, then at the small, gray Chiron. For the first time, someone was telling him his weakness was a feature of his biology. She found an Alarian, a species known for lightning-fast reflexes but light bone structure, in the lower percentiles. Your failure profile in high-impact simulations is due to an inefficient energy distribution model, Iona told Zerine, showing her a chart of Alarian metabolic rates. The Hayes method will teach you to manage your energy expenditure for tactical advantage. The group that gathered around them was small, a Colossian, an Alarian, and a handful of others. Mars's standards had deemed each a failure, all united by the simple, radical idea that strength was about recovery as much as endurance. For 6 weeks, they trained in secret, until Mar decided he'd waited long enough. Whispers in the corridors called it the Hayes method, a fringe movement, a curiosity. The moment came during the morning briefing. Mar appeared on the main screen, his expression arranged into a look of thoughtful concern. He announced a new series of cross-species unified trials, designed, he claimed, to foster interspecies cooperation and tactical synergy. The first event would be the Gravity Labyrinth. Mars's gaze seemed to find Eric through the screen. To inaugurate this new initiative, I'm issuing a public challenge. Cadet Keyes, a top-ranked student, will compete against Cadet Hayes, representing his novel training philosophy. The entire mess hall went silent, and everyone turned to Eric. Mar had moved the battle to ground of his own choosing. Back in the archives, Iona's tendrils flew across her console. He's a fool, she murmured, pulling up the labyrinth schematics. His arrogance is a predictable vulnerability. She pointed a tendril at the screen. Look, The high-gravity fields are intermittent. The system requires massive energy, so it pulses, maintaining peak gravity only in sections. Low-G safe zones always exist. Eric looked at the complex layout. So what's the strategy? The winning strategy is recovery over resistance. Keyes will power through the high-G sections using brute strength, and it'll exhaust him. The key is rapid, efficient recovery in the low-G safe zones. We'll use recovery to beat his strength. The training shifted. Iona drilled Eric, Orzo, and the others in techniques to control blood flow under extreme gravitational stress, forcing oxygen to the brain. She had them drill a form of moving meditation, using the brief respites in the safe zones to perform mental recentering exercises, clearing the cognitive fog that high-G forces induced. On race day, Mar had invited observers from the other Trine Mandate powers. The labyrinth was a massive, transparent structure, allowing the assembled cadets and dignitaries to watch the competitors navigate its glowing corridors. The starting horn blared. Keyes shot forward, his axiomite frame powering through the first high-G field. His muscles corded under the strain, but he kept his pace. Eric was slower. When the gravity hit, he moved with it. He braced, controlled his breathing, and moved with a steady, deliberate pace, conserving every ounce of energy. The moment he entered a low-G pocket, he moved at a deliberate pace. He paused for just 2 seconds and executed the breathing cycle Iona had taught him. His spiked heart rate immediately began to drop. From the outside, Keyes appeared to dominate. He built a substantial lead, but Iona, watching the biometric readouts on her data screen, permitted herself a fractional nod. Keyes' vitals climbed into the red. His cortisol levels spiked. He burned fuel at an unsustainable rate. Eric's, however, were a steady sine wave of spike and recovery. Spike and recovery. The labyrinth's final stretch was a holographic puzzle that required rerouting fine-gauge circuits against a time limit. Keyes reached it first, sweat plastering his uniform to his skin. He breathed in ragged gasps. He placed his hands on the console, but they trembled from the strain. His first attempt to manipulate the circuits failed. He growled in frustration, trying again, his movements clumsy. Eric arrived 30 seconds later. He was tired, his muscles aching, but he breathed evenly. He walked to the console, took one centering breath, and placed his hands on the controls. His hands were steady. He completed the puzzle in 21 seconds. A green light flashed above his station. Victory! The observation deck fell silent. Keyes stared at his console, then at Eric, his mouth agape. He was stronger, faster, more powerful, and he had lost. Eric looked up at the observation platform where Dean Marr stood, his posture rigid. The Dean's polite smile had vanished. He stared down at Eric, his expression flat and hostile. Saris found Iona in the archives 2 days after the gravity labyrinth. She approached silently, her pale axiomite features composed. She got straight to the point. House Marr's stock dipped sharply following the trial, Sarek stated, her voice as cool and smooth as polished stone. His public failures have become a liability for all axiomite enterprises. My house finds this inefficient. Iona tilted her head, her sensory membrane processing the subtle vibrations of Saris's speech. An interesting market fluctuation. How does it relate to my research? It's directly relevant, Saris countered. She placed a small silver data chip on the table between them. Marr finds public humiliation intolerable. He intends to cheat in the next trial. He'll use a proprietary neurotoxin delivered through the simulator's atmospheric system. It specifically targets a human acetylcholine receptor, inducing temporary muscular paralysis. He acquired the compound's makeup through industrial espionage, against one of my family's pharmaceutical subsidiaries. Iona's tendrils froze mid-motion, but her mind raced. This had escalated beyond a pedagogical dispute. "You're giving me this information, why?" Saris met her steady gaze. "Publicly exposing a war college dean for using stolen corporate secrets to poison a cadet in an official trial will trigger an immediate and comprehensive contract review of all Mar Industries technology within the Academy. My house would, of course, be in a favorable position to bid on the replacement contracts." Her lips curved in a subtle smile. "Ensure his humiliation is spectacular." Iona picked up the chip. Saris gave a single sharp nod and turned, leaving as silently as she arrived. "Synthesizing a full-spectrum antidote would take weeks," Iona said, her voice a rapid-fire staccato of analysis. The neurotoxin's molecular structure glowed in the air between them, a complex framework of atoms. "However, the compound's half-life is predictable." Eric studied the diagram. "So I wait it out?" "No, waiting is a losing strategy. Keyes' axiomite metabolism will process the agent at a slow, steady rate. He'll be impaired, but functional. The agent's design targets human biology. It'll hit you harder and faster. The initial paralysis will be total." She brought up another chart, this one showing human metabolic pathways. "But a counter exists, a brute force solution. Controlled hyperventilation, combined with a pre-trial regimen of nutrient catalysts, will temporarily accelerate your metabolic processing. You'll essentially force your body to burn through the toxin." Eric frowned. "What's the catch?" "The physical cost will be extreme," Iona stated, her tone flat. "You'll put your system under a level of strain equivalent to a full sprint marathon. A high probability of ruptured blood vessels, severe muscle cramping, and temporary neurological disorientation exists." Sounds like a party." The next trial was a combat simulation, a hostage rescue scenario in a high-density urban environment. Keyes and Eric would compete in identical simultaneous runs. The winner would be the one with the fastest completion time. Eric consumed the nutrient-rich paste Iona prepared. It had the chemical taste of burnt sugar. He entered the simulator pod, his heart already beating a little faster than usual. The simulation began. He was in a dark alley, rain slicking the pavement. He took 2 steps, and then it hit him. His muscles locked. He crashed to the ground, his limbs immobile. A wave of simulated nausea washed over him. Through his headset, he could hear Keyes' progress. Gunshots, shouted commands. He was already falling behind. Now, Iona spoke in his ear, calm and direct. "Initiate breathing sequence alpha." His body was immobile, but he could still control his lungs. He began the exercise they had drilled, a series of deep, percussive breaths that forced oxygen into his system. His lungs burned. His heart thundered against his ribs. Black spots sparked in his vision. Then a flicker, a twitch in his finger. He focused on it, pushing through the agonizing full-body cramp that was setting in. He managed to clench his fist. The paralysis was cracking. With a guttural roar of effort, he forced himself to his knees. His muscles felt like they were tearing from the bone. He got to his feet, staggering. His vision swam, but he was moving. He could hear Keyes nearing the objective. Eric broke into a clumsy run, every muscle screaming. He completed the objective, tagging the final hostage dummy, just as a wave of dizziness sent him crashing to his knees. A klaxon sounded. The simulation ended. Victory. Impaired by the toxin, Keyes' reaction time had slowed just enough for him to misidentify a target, shooting a hostage instead of a hostile and earning a massive time penalty. The pod door opened. Eric stumbled out, a violent nosebleed gushing from his nostrils. His knees buckled, and the deck rushed up to meet him, as his vision dissolved into a gray smear. While Eric recovered in the medbay, Iona used her mentor's keys and dove deep into the Academy's most secure archives, the sealed medical records of cadets medically retired over the past 2 decades. Her tendrils flew across the console, inputting the string of legacy code. The system paused, then a new directory unfolded. As the files loaded, a single line of text flashed in the corner of her display before vanishing. Alert! Legacy admin override logged. Manual security audit queued. Estimated completion 72 hours. She had 3 days. She cross-referenced the toxin's chemical markers with the symptoms described in the cadet's files. A pattern emerged. Mar had washed out dozens of cadets, mostly from ancillary or newly contacted species with biology superficially similar to humans. The official reason was always the same: a pre-existing biological condition or genetic incompatibility with high-stress training. The Mars simulators were dangerously defective for a dozen other species. The neurofeedback systems, when met with unfamiliar biology, occasionally produced rogue electrical impulses and toxic protein buildups that caused cumulative neurological damage. Iona found heavily encrypted memos from Mars' own engineers warning of the potential for adverse bioreactions in specific non-axiomite species. He had buried the reports, silenced the engineers, and ruined the lives of promising cadets to protect his family's corporate empire from the scandal of a full product recall. Iona stared at the evidence she had compiled. She held the power to destroy Sindel Mar, to shatter his house, to break his monopoly. But she also knew that releasing this information haphazardly could do more than that. It could destabilize the entire Trine Mandate military command, which relied on a foundation of Mar technology. The timing had to be perfect. Dean Mar summoned Eric to his office. The room was the size of Eric's entire barracks block, with one wall made of smart glass overlooking the Academy grounds. Mar sat behind a desk of polished, petrified wood, a fossil from a world long dead. He gestured to a chair. "Cadet Hayes," Mar began, his voice smooth, "your recent performances have been remarkable. You have shown an unexpected talent for creative problem-solving." Eric remained silent. He sat, shoulders loose, and waited. "Your Hayes method," Mar continued, steepling his long fingers, "while unorthodox, clearly has some merit for certain niche physiologies. I've been thinking, the Academy has been too rigid in its approach. It's time for a paradigm shift." He leaned forward, a benevolent smile on his face. "I'm prepared to offer you a full tenured position on the Academy faculty. A research grant to further develop your methods, under the Mar Pedagogical Institute's auspices, of course. A full scholarship to complete your officer training. You'd be a symbol of our new, more inclusive curriculum." Mars's tone hardened almost imperceptibly. "There would be, of course, a few conditions. You'd need to publicly acknowledge the foundational superiority of the core Mar system. We'd present your method as a supplemental specialized program. And, naturally, you'd withdraw from any further public competitions. You've made your point." Eric thought of the names Iona had shown him, the cadets this man's greed had broken. He looked at the dean, at his polished smile and his flat, lifeless eyes. "I'm flattered, Dean," Eric said, his voice even, "but I have to decline." Mars's smile held, but a muscle in his jaw bunched. "May I ask why?" "Your system teaches cadets how to break," Eric said, rising from his chair. "I'm teaching them how to heal. The two are incompatible." The smile vanished. Mars's expression became flat. He dropped his voice to a whisper. "You'll regret that choice, Cadet." At a full Academy assembly, Marr stood at a podium, his expression somber. Cadet Hayes' recent successes have raised important questions about our training doctrine, he began. While his methods are controversial, they deserve a final definitive test. Therefore, I am announcing the semester's ultimate trial, the Mandate Gauntlet. A murmur went through the assembled cadets. The Gauntlet was the Academy's most advanced combat simulator, an exam for only the most elite squads. The trial will pit a squad of our finest champions, led by Cadet Keyes, against Cadet Hayes and a unit of his own choosing. Marr paused, letting the statement settle. The stakes will be absolute. If Hayes' unit is victorious, we'll officially integrate the Hayes method into the Academy curriculum. We'll commend him and his followers. He let that hang in the air for a beat. If he loses, we'll summarily expel him for insubordination and promoting dangerous, unsanctioned training protocols. We'll permanently ban his method and blacklist all cadets who participated in it from command consideration. Their careers will be over. Mars's lips curved. And one final detail. We have custom-programmed the arena for this gauntlet. We have compiled all the biometric and performance data from Cadet Hayes' previous trials. We'll specifically design the environment to exploit every known human weakness, physiological and psychological. He leaned into the microphone. Let's see if recovery is as useful as resistance when the pressure is constant. Eric's squad was a collection of parts from different machines. Orso, the immense Colossian whose explosive power was unsustainable beyond a 30-second sprint. Zyrene, the lightning-fast but fragile Alarian. A tough, resilient Carthian named Fash, whose dense plating absorbed punishment he was built to endure. A dozen cadets in all. They were his only hope. In a disused cargo bay, they trained. Iona and Eric worked them relentlessly. They forged them into a new kind of fighting unit. The Marr Doctrine is a monolith, Iona explained, pointing to a diagram on a flickering screen. Sustained, high-level output. It assumes all participants have the same endurance profile. We'll operate on a different principle. The pulse. They drilled it into them. The Colossian learned to manage his stamina for explosive, overwhelming bursts of action. The hammer brought out to shatter a target, then immediately pulled back to recover. The Alarian became their scout, using her incredible speed for quick strikes and hit-and-run maneuvers, followed by strategic rests. The Carthian became their anchor, a mobile wall they could form a defense around, giving the others the space they needed to execute their recovery periods. They learned to fight in a rhythm, a coordinated pulse of high-intensity action followed by swift, secure withdrawals into a defensive posture for a coordinated 30-second rest. They learned to anticipate each other's fatigue, to cover a teammate's retreat with instinct. They were finding a rhythm, tuning their individual limitations into a collective strength. The night before the gauntlet, Eric found himself alone in a simulator running through variables, an exhaustion so deep in his bones that rest failed to touch it. His movements were slow, but deliberate. The door hissed open and Iona entered. She stood for a moment, her sensory membrane analyzing him. Your cortisol levels are elevated. Your reaction times have decreased. The coming trial's tension settled deep in his gut. I'm focusing, Eric lied. Iona tilted her head. My models are complete. Based on the gauntlet's announced parameters and the known endurance capacities of Keyes' champions, our energy expenditure will exceed our recovery rate by the 30-minute mark. Statistically, a prolonged engagement is a guaranteed loss. The words hung in the air, an algorithmic death sentence. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. However, she added, the Gauntlet's central control network will operate at maximum processing load during the live simulation. Its security subroutines will run under heavy load. I have identified a potential exploit vector. Should an opportunity arise to upload a data packet to the central server, the injection window will be narrow, but the network's defenses will be at their weakest. Eric looked over at the cargo bay, where his team was performing a final gear check. Orso argued with Zyrene about weapon maintenance. Vash meditated calmly. They were scared and outmatched, but they were ready. "Your models are brilliant, Iona," Eric said in a low voice. "They just overlook one variable." "And that is?" "Stubbornness," he managed a tired smile. "I trust them." Iona processed this. She glanced from Eric to the team, tilting her head slightly as if listening to an inaudible sound. She offered a fractional nod. "The variable of stubbornness," she said, her voice its usual clinical monotone. "I will attempt to model it for future scenarios." The world resolved into a swamp of dripping vegetation and oppressive humidity. The Mandate Gauntlet had begun, and Mar had chosen a hostile jungle as the opening arena. The terrain itself was a weapon, with shifting ground and thick, grasping vines that snagged at their feet. Keyes' squad opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts erupted from the dense foliage, a coordinated assault designed to scatter and shock. The bolts sizzled through the air, turning ancient trees to ash. Eric's squad dove for cover, pinned down. One of their number cried out as his vital signs flatlined on their HUDs. First point to the champions. The ground buckled and shifted, massive pillars of rock rising from the jungle floor, funneling Eric's scattered team into a narrow, rocky canyon. Eric's heart pounded. A kill box. Then the familiar crushing weight of a high-G field slammed down on them. An instant later, a hazy green gas poured into the canyon from hidden vents. The neurotoxin. Mar was combining every past trial into one. High above the canyon rim, Keyes' unit appeared, weapons leveled. They moved in for the kill, their axiomite frames bearing the gravity field strain. "Anchor!" Eric yelled into his comms, his voice strained by the G-force. "Breathing sequence! Emergency O2!" His team responded on instinct. They braced against the rocks. They activated their suit's small oxygen reserves to counter the gas and began the forced breathing exercises to fight the toxin. Simulated plasma impacts slammed into their cover, showering them with rock splinters. Their position held. They endured. The plasma barrage slowed, then stopped. Keyes' team, having burned a massive amount of energy in their opening strike, paused to consolidate. "Now!" Eric commanded. "Pulse!" The high-G field dissipated. While Keyes' team recovered from the exertion, Eric's squad exploded into action. They had used the 30-second barrage to execute a recovery cycle. They emerged from their cover more organized, more focused, and more energetic than their opponents expected. The counterattack was swift. Orso, roaring, charged forward in an explosive burst, his heavy weapon carving a chunk out of the champion's defensive line before he immediately fell back. Zyrene zipped along the canyon walls, a blur of motion, her direct shots forcing two of Keyes' squad to abandon their advantageous positions. Then, as they had attacked, they retreated, melting back into the jungle. They drew the infuriated axiomites after them, deeper into the treacherous, shifting terrain. The fight became a series of violent bursts. Eric's squad would strike, targeting a single enemy, then vanish to recover. They yielded ground, engaging only in brief, decisive clashes. Their tactics eroded the champion's discipline and stamina. Their movements became sloppy, their lines ragged. Keyes, his face contorted with frustration, roared into his comms. He was losing control, forgetting tactics. He broke ranks, charging forward, determined to finish Eric himself. Eric led Keyes on a chase through a maze of twisting, moss-covered rock. Keyes was stronger, his every blow a simulated impact that could shatter stone. But exhaustion fueled his wide, predictable swings. Eric, though every muscle ached, kept his mind clear. He used the shifting terrain, the sudden appearance of a chasm, or a rising pillar of rock to his advantage. As Keyes lunged one last time, roaring his name, Eric pivoted. He dropped low, sweeping Keyes' legs out from under him. The big axiomite crashed to the ground. And as he scrambled to rise, Eric was on him, pressing a training knife to his throat. A meter away, a holographic sign flashed into existence. Victory. The simulation dissolved. They were back in the vast, empty arena, the stands filled with the Academy leadership's silent, watching forms. The moment the system confirmed victory, every screen in the arena, the main view screen, the scoreboards, the personal slates of every official and dignitary in the room, flickered and went dark. A second later, they flashed back to life, displaying Iona's data. The suppressed research from her mentor, the causality reports, the long list of medically retired cadets, their careers cut short, the stolen neurotoxin's molecular structure, displayed next to the internal Mar Industries memo warning of its dangers, decades of corruption displayed for the entire Trine mandate to see. Dean Marr stood frozen in the observation deck, his face ashen. A low murmur rippled through the assembled officials. On the platform, Eric saw Saris. She ignored the screens. She was looking at two grim-faced officials from the Trine Mandate Oversight Committee, leaning in and speaking in a low, urgent tone. An official gave a sharp nod. The trap was sprung. Weeks later, a new name appeared above the Forge's entrance, the Resilience Center. The press was still there, but now cadets lined up to use it for its newly discovered purpose. They called them power naps. Eric Hayes stood at the room's center. The constant pressure behind his eyes was a distant memory. He looked out at the new cadets' faces before him, axiomites, Colossians, Hilarians, and even a few newly admitted humans. This was the new semester's first class. "Some will tell you strength is about how much you can take before you break," Eric said, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily through the chamber. "They're wrong. It's about how well you can put yourself back together. It's about knowing when to fight and when to rest." A smile reached his eyes. "Today," he said, gesturing to the sleek black pods, "we're going to begin. I'm going to teach you all how to sleep."